this is Candy from Infinite Expressions, and I'm with you today to discuss my top 5 strings to use for making waist beads. I've noticed that there are a lot of people who ask what type of string would be good to use, and I had to do a lot of research, and it took a lot of trial and error just to kind of get a good combination of what felt right for me. So I'm gonna show you what I have today, and we'll see if it also works for you as well. So the first string that we have to talk about, which I'll go with what I've originally started with, it's called the waxed cotton cord. When I first did research, whenever I was first starting, this was really the only one that I could find information on, and it was with people that I read who did make waist beads. They basically said, it's made with waxed cotton cord, it's a tie-on, no twist off. Usually the strands are about 50 inches and then you just tie it to your size and they stay on. So I knew when I first started, I primarily wanted to have ends that would basically twist on, twist off, or clasp like with the lobster clasp. However, I don't really use that. I prefer the twist on method, but there are different methods. We'll talk about that as well. This is the waxed cotton cord. I'll give you a more detailed look as well. So this is it here, and as you can tell, the size for this one, I ordered like a huge box of like the 1mm, and then I realized that the beads that I ordered were the size 11.0, which is usually about 2mm or like 2.5mm, so they didn't fit. So I was like, okay, so I have to go back and get a smaller size. I also ended up getting beads that were 6.0, which is like 4mm, at least 3mm minimum. And I noticed that with the 1mm string, it was harder to string the beads because one, the holes weren't all that well adjusted to where you could just stick it through. Some of them were kind of warped, and it was just really complicated and frustrating. So at that time I didn't have a spinning bead, and I didn't have like all of the things that I have now to be able to successfully make a bead in under 45 minutes to an hour tops. So this size currently right now that I'm showing you is a size 0.65mm, and I've noticed that that one, it's smaller, so it fits the 6.0 beads, but it still does not fit the 11.0 beads. They do have smaller, which is 0.5. The 0.5mm fits the small beads, and it also fits the big beads. However, it doesn't fit through, well, it fits through a needle, but it's a bit more time consuming to put a bead together. Usually if I'm using the smaller beads, I would use like the 0.5 if I were using this type of string. Now the problem with using this string, however, that I've noticed is that it says it's a waxed cotton cord. It doesn't really fray that easily. However, it does after continuous use of putting beads onto it. It does tend to fray and kind of loosen up a bit. So I ended up buying, well, not super glue, but like the E600 fabric glue, and I used that to kind of strengthen the end where I would put the beads onto, and that kind of helped it stay long enough for me to be able to put the beads on there. And I had to do that with both this size string and also with the smaller size string. Eventually though, I was like, okay, so I have to find a different method. This one works, but I kind of want something that's less, I don't want to work hard doing it because I'm already working hard putting the beads onto the string, so I kind of want something a little easier to handle. So that's when I did some more research, and I found a few things that I kind of wanted to try out. So I decided that I was going to do some pop-up shops, and with those I didn't want to use string because with the string you do have to have the exact measurements of the person in order to have the waist bead lay exactly where they want it to be able to lay. So with the stretch string, you don't necessarily need exact measurements. I usually do increments of 5, and from there I kind of base it off of that. So if they're in between 25 inches and 30 inches, like say 27 inches, then somewhere they would fit a 25 but not quite a 30, and that's what I would base it off of. The next string that I decided to try was the stretch string, You know, I learned my lesson with the 1mm. I was like, okay, I'll try something different. So with the stretch string, I decided to try 0.8mm. That was still too big for the 11.0 seed beads. So it worked for my 6.0 seed beads, but not my 11.0. So I ended up having to get a smaller size with that as well. So the best stretch string that I've seen to come across would be this, which is the Crystal Tech. This right here is the 0.8. I'll show another picture here. Okay, this one is probably the best stretch string that I've tried. I found one that was kind of stringy and I didn't like it because it frayed so easily and then the strings would kind of come apart, and I was like, nah, you know, even though it's a stretch string, I still want it to be at least durable enough for someone to wear. So I tried this and, you know, I really like it. The only thing is it does need to be stretched prior to you beading it, just a little bit, not like a whole lot, just stretch it, you know, a little bit, not too much. And once you do that, you can bead it and that's it. You know, you're pretty much good to go. I made the mistake of making one without doing that, and I tried it out and there were just patches of space where beads could have been, and I was like, oh my god, I can't do this. So I learned to, you know, stretch it beforehand. So I was like, okay, well, I ended up buying a ton of seed beads, the size 11.0, because, you know, trying my first time, it was like looking at the pictures, it seemed bigger than it really was, and I didn't know the difference between the sizes at the time. So when I first bought them, I was like, okay, you know, I got these, there's a whole bunch in them, I could make so many, and it's more cost effective. And I got them, I was like, oh my god, they're so small, what am I gonna do? But I was like, you know, they should have string that's, you know, smaller. So I ended up finding the 0.5, and the 0.5 fits with the 11.0 seed beads, no problem. And I was able to string them pretty consistently. It is pretty time consuming because they're a lot smaller, but I would take, you know, a few at a time, put them between my thumb and my middle finger and just kind of put them on there. That's how I initially started. The 0.5 of the stretch string would be this right here, and it comes pretty big. It's about 100 meters, so it comes with a lot. You don't really have to use a lot of it. And again, also recommend to stretch it out before you go to beading it. It's not really good to put heavy charms on it because it will stretch it out more and make it to where there's a lot of space in between it as well, because the charms are so heavy so it can't hold itself up. The string is really good, it's durable, but it's also really stretchy. So the thinner it is the stretch, the easier it stretches. So you definitely want to be careful with that. I would say, like, if you're doing simple charms like these charms, you really wouldn't have too much of an issue because they don't have a lot of weight to them. But if you're doing, like, say, like a chakra charm, where it's like the little pyramid, that's pretty heavy, so, you know, that would definitely cause some weight to it. Big beads as well, if you're using beads that are bigger than like the 6.0, like the 8mm beads or the 10mm beads are usually pretty heavy depending on the type of beads that you're using. For me, I personally work with gemstones, so the gemstone beads, they tend to be heavy the bigger that they are. Moving on, for the moment with my stretch, I haven't tried anything else aside from the ones I just showed you, and they work really well for me. However, you can tie it, and for the most part, if you maybe double or triple knot it, it will stay tied. However, personally, I usually put glue to kind of keep it staying there because it does tend to unravel. So another thing I'm going to talk about is using thread. Initially, I didn't want to try thread because I was like, you know, it's really flimsy. I want to make sure it's durable to the point where it's not going to cause any problem with it breaking. I did some research and I actually found a lady on YouTube here. If I can find her link again, I'll put it in the description. She talks about using this particular thread to string her beads, and she says that she does it, you know, she does maybe 4 to 5 strings of thread per waist bead, depending on the size of the beads. So I think it's about 4 that she used for like the 11.0 beads, and about 5 that she used for the 6.0 beads. So I gave it a try, and this is the thread that she said works really good, and it's cotton, it's all purpose. She says that when it gets wet, it kind of swells up, so it makes it to where the beads don't really move as easily, which, you know, is okay, it isn't really a problem. So I gave it a try, and I did my first bead with it. I noticed that with the types of beads that I have, they are misshaped, so a lot of them don't have, you know, perfect circular holes, which makes it a bit hard to actually string them correctly. And I noticed upon doing it that with using this particular string, I couldn't use 4 strings together like she could. I had to use like 3, because using 4 was causing an issue of, you know, one of the strings breaking, and I'd find myself have to constantly like cut the edge and restring it through the needle, and it was just a lot of work, which also really good, you can use it through a needle. Yeah, awesome. So this is the waist bead that I did with the string. As you can tell, you can't really see it, but it's just kind of like a yin yang type of thing. It's black and white beads, but the white beads, I really had no problem stringing them. They were made really good to the point where the holes were big enough for everything to fit through. It was really with the black beads that I had a problem getting the holes through completely. Some of them are kind of warped, so I had to use 3 strings of the thread to put it together, and I really didn't have a problem with the spreading at the end or anything like that, to the point where it would give me a problem with getting it strung. So still overall pretty good. That's actually one that I have for sale now. And the other one that I kind of picked up because I guess I just kind of wanted to give it a try is the Beadalon Wildfire. So this one, I picked it up at Walmart. But this one, as you can see, it's also, you know, a thread as well, and it's specifically for bead weaving. The texture of it is actually really thick for it to be, you know, thread for beading. Actually, I really like this one because I only had to use 2 and be okay, but not thick enough to the point where I couldn't fit my beads through it. So I really like that, and it also worked with these small beads that I was having an issue with initially, which is also good. Also fit on the needle, so I didn't have to worry about it going through and, you know, fraying or causing any problem with that. Also with the thread that I just showed you with both of them, I don't have to use glue with those if I do decide to do waist beads that are tie-on, or even if I'm just doing waist beads that are for people who would prefer that other than, you know, the other wire that I use. I'm also going to talk about using wire. Now initially, whenever I first started, I didn't really read anything about using wire as a waist bead, and so I wasn't really comfortable with giving it a try. However, you know, I did try one of them. I noticed that I wouldn't be able to use the tie method like I normally do. I would actually have to use a different method, which in this case, you know, would be using like the crimps and jump rings and lobster claw, or even just kind of using the twist on that has the little thing hole that you can stick it through and just put the clamps onto that. So those, which I initially first bought, would be these, which they're super small so you can't see them, but as you can see, it has like the little rings on it at the end, the little wiring here, where you can just stick the wire through it and then you can crimp it and it twists, you know, on and off. The only thing with this though is that it's good if you plan on wearing them maybe for like a couple hours or so, but if it's something that you plan on wearing all the time, it's not really a good one to use because the wiring is actually really flimsy and it can, you know, bend, especially if you do a lot of moving. So this is the wiring that I've tried, and I've noticed using the 24 gauge, which is what this is. This one works really well with stringing both the 6/0 beads and the 11/0 beads. I have no problem with that. It makes it really easy. Plus I can just pick it up with the wire. I don't have to worry about using a needle or anything like that. And then I also purchased this one, which is a bit smaller than the 24 gauge, but I could still also fit my small beads on it as well. And this one, it has multiple wiring under a kind of like plastic wrap. It makes it pretty sturdy. The only risk that you run with these is that if they get bent the wrong way, then they're kind of like, you know, there's that dent in it with the wiring. You know, it basically makes it look like this, and then you can't really straighten it out like you want it to. So there's always going to be like that indent there. So I don't really like using this one that often. This one, I don't foresee actually having that issue. It's really flexible, so you can kind of bend it, and as you can see, like I'm bending it, and it's not forming that dent there. So I think that's really good to use as well. So I gave that a try, and I did one initially, but I didn't have the correct tie on. Like with this one, it's so flexible that I was able to tie a knot in it, but I figured, you know, if I was really going to use this one indefinitely, I would need to get lobster claws and jump rings as well to be able to use it with that. But, you know, everyone has their preference. This for me is just, you know, if I want to try something new, for ones that are maybe like extremely designed with the type of waist beads that I make. I have some that are pretty regular. They don't really have like any intricate designs, and I have some that do have intricate designs. So they definitely vary. And I also meant to show you a waist bead that I actually did with the stretch string to kind of give you an idea of what it would look like. As you can see, it's really really flexible, pretty stretchy. Had no problem with putting like a pendant on it. This one's made out of epoxy resin, so it's not that heavy, and with the beads on it that are in it, it's also, you know, not really a problem. This is with the 0.8 stretch string, so it turned out pretty good. And with this, I added, you know, the little clasp, the twist on clasp as red as well, to kind of give you a chance to, you know, take it on and off without having to put it over your head and stretch it anymore. Majority of this stuff can be found on Amazon or Joann's or Michael's, even Hobby Lobby. For the string, I think I mostly got most of the string from Amazon and Joann's. The last one that I'm going to talk to you about, which is my personal favorite, fishing wire. Which when I first heard it, I was like, you know, I didn't think that I could use that. And it's like, you know, what? I don't know if I want to do that. I don't know. But I gave it a try, and I really like it. It's very durable. It's currently my go-to out of all of these. I will be quick to make one out of fishing wire. The upside for it for me, as you can see, this one I think I had gotten from like Walmart, but as you can see, you know, it holds up to 30 pounds, which is awesome. Comes with a lot, so I don't even use that much. You can basically just use it and just pick the beads up. You don't have to use a needle with it. It doesn't fit through a needle, but if you get a needle and you put some tape and you attach the tape and the needle midway, you know, cut it at the end, you can slide the beads right on through. And it only really works for the 6/0 beads, not so much for the 11/0 beads. The 6/0 beads though, you can do it no problem, and I have no problem doing it. And that's usually if I'm doing a waist bead that just has random colors throughout. If I'm doing one that's designed, then I'll just by hand put them on there and just kind of pick them up with it, which you'll see in some of my videos what my technique is. That one fits the 6/0 and higher beads, but not so much of the 11/0. So I actually went through and I purchased a smaller size that fits the 11/0, which would be this here. This one, which also says it holds up to 40 pounds. This one I use for my smaller beads, which are the 11.0, and I have no problem stringing it. It doesn't take me that long. I can literally just put a pile of beads on my beading mat, which, yeah, my beading mat. It's basically like literally a felt fabric, and it just keeps the beads from rolling. But I'll put a pile of beads on it, and I'll just stick the string through it, and it just picks them up, no problem. So it doesn't even take me that long to go through the process. I would say overall, it is very, very useful. One of my favorites to use and my current go-to right now, especially since I make waist beads primarily for bigger women. So I feel like that particular string works better for me. This is the current waist bead that I have made from fishing wire, and as you can see, I've got, you know, got crystals on it, clear quartz crystals. There's some other little turtles and different size beads. I have both the 11.0 size beads and the 6.0 size beads with it as well, and everything just fits perfectly on there. There's no problem. It's not heavy, it's really light, and overall just wonderful to use. It's my favorite. And it also fits through like the little shells. As you can see, I've got little shells on there. No problem getting those to fit or anything. So I also want to talk about the tools that you would need as well. This is the crimper that I use. You put it through the first level right here. This kind of ties it to make it kind of split in half, and then after that, this is how it closes. Very easy to use, very simple. This one right here is one of my favorite because I deal with a lot of jump rings sometimes, and because I also make, you know, earrings and stuff like that. So this one helps with opening up the jump rings, and also, you know, twisting wire around. If you do a lot of, you know, work with wire, it definitely helps with that. This one here is the flat one. This is really good for, you know, helping with tying the string if you want to pull it through, or string with the needle as well. Depending on the wire that you can use it to flatten the wire. The one that I usually use has ridges on it, so it kind of, I guess, gives it an extra grip. Overall, they both, you know, they all work really well. There's another set that I use here that are actually wire cutters. They would have basically a bit shorter than this one, and you would just cut it with wires, and you can use it to cut like wires like this, or, you know, like this. Basically, it works really good with cutting those. That's primarily what I use it for. So overall, those are the main tools that I use for the most part. So yeah, this is basically my, you know, top 5 strings to use for waist beads. I know doing the research for me, it was very complicated. It was kind of frustrating and overwhelming because there wasn't really a lot of information out there, and I do feel like, you know, everyone who's interested in making them kind of needs, you know, at least a go-to that they can reference, so that way it gives them an idea of what to start with. Because you go online and you Google, you know, how to make waist beads, there isn't a lot of information. I assume it's because, you know, they don't want everyone like mass producing them and things like that, which is understandable. You know, it's an African culture thing. You know, it's not something for everybody, but for those who really enjoy it, they at least need to know where to go and what to do and how to do it. So that's why I'm making this video, and I hope that you've enjoyed it. Definitely like and subscribe, check out my other videos, and be on the lookout for more content. Bye!